I don't know about your dreams, but mine are sort of hackneyed. Same thing night after night, just repetitive. And the color is really bad, and the themes are just infantile. And you always get what you want, and that's just not the way life is. I came home today and both our cars were gone, and there were all these new pink flamingos arranged in star patterns all over the lawn. And then I went into the kitchen and it looked like a tornado had hit. And then I realized I was in the wrong house. Last night I had that dream again. I dreamed I had to take a test in a Dairy Queen on another planet. And in this dream I looked around, and there was this woman. She was making it all up. She was writing it all down. And she was laughing. She was laughing her head off. And I said, "Hey, give me that pen." I turned a corner in Soho today and someone looked right at me and said, "Oh no, another Laurie Anderson clone." And I said, Look at me. 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 Look at me.
Now, only an expert can deal with the problem, because half the problem is seeing the problem. And only an expert can deal with the problem. Only an expert can deal with the problem. So if there's no expert dealing with the problem, it's really actually twice the problem, because only an expert can deal with the problem. Only an expert can deal with the problem. In America, we like solutions. We like solutions to problems. And there's so many companies that offer solutions. Companies with names like the pet solution, the hair solution, the debt solution, the world solution, the sushi solution. Companies with experts ready to solve these problems. Because only an expert can see there's a problem, and only an expert can deal with the problem. Only an expert can deal with the problem. Let's say you're invited to be on Oprah, and you don't have a problem, but you want to go on the show, and so you need a problem, and so you invent a problem. But if you're not an expert in problems, you're probably not going to make up a very plausible problem. And so you're probably going to get nailed. You're going to get exposed. And you're going to have to bow down and apologize and beg for the public's forgiveness. 'Cause only an expert can deal with the problem, and only an expert can deal with the problem, and only an expert can deal with the problem. And on these shows, the shows that try to solve your problems, the big question is always, how can I get control? How can I take control? But don't forget, this is a question for the regular viewer, the person who's barely getting by, the person who's watching shows about people with problems, the person who's one of the 60% of the US population, 1.3 weeks away, 1.3 paychecks away from a shelter. In other words, a person with problems. So when experts say, let's get to the root of the problem, let's take control of the problem, because if you take control of the problem, you can solve the problem. Often this doesn't work at all because the situation is completely out of control. Because only an expert can deal with the problem, and only an expert can deal with the problem, and only an expert can deal with the problem. Sometimes experts lend you money, and sometimes they lend you lots of money. And sometimes when the subprime mortgages collapse, and banks close and businesses fail, and the crisis spreads around the world, sometimes other experts say, just because all the markets crashed doesn't mean it's necessarily a bad thing. And other experts say, just because all your friends are fired and your family's broke and we didn't see it coming doesn't mean that we were wrong. And just because you lost your job and your house and all your savings doesn't mean that you don't have to pay for the bailouts, for the traders and the bankers and the speculators. Because only an expert can design a bailout, and only an expert can expect a bailout. Because only an expert can deal with the problem, and only an expert can deal with the problem, and only an expert can deal with the problem. July and January, and there's no more snow, and huge waves are wiping out cities, and hurricanes are everywhere, and everyone knows it's a problem. But if some of the experts say it's no problem, and if other experts claim it's no problem, or explain why it's no problem, then it's simply not a problem. But when an expert says it's a problem, and makes a movie about the problem, and wins an Oscar about the problem, and gets the Nobel Prize about the problem, then all the other experts have to agree it is most likely a problem. 'Cause only an expert can deal with the problem, and only an expert can deal with the problem, and only an expert can deal with the problem. Can invade another country and flatten it and ruin it and create havoc and civil war in that other country. If the experts say it's not a problem, and everyone agrees they're experts and good at seeing problems, then invading those countries is simply not a problem. And if a country tortures people and holds citizens without cause or trial and sets up military tribunals, this is also not a problem. Unless there's an expert who says, this is the beginning of a problem. 'Cause only an expert can deal with the problem, and only an expert can deal with the problem, and only an expert can deal with the problem. 'Cause only an expert can deal with the problem, and only an expert can deal with the problem, and only an expert can deal with the problem. 'Cause only an expert can see there's a problem, and seeing the problem is half the problem. 'Cause only an expert can deal with the problem, only an expert can deal with the problem. Now, the book is called Stories from the Nerve Bible. And what I mean by the Nerve Bible is the body. And parts of the body appear and disappear throughout the book, adding up to a kind of self-portrait, although not a very naturalistic one. And I used the word Bible in the title of this book because the first really strange stories I remember hearing were Bible stories. And these stories were completely amazing, about parting oceans and talking snakes. And people really seemed to believe these stories. And I'm talking about adults. Adults who mainly just did the most mundane things imaginable, mowing their lawns and throwing potluck parties. They all believed in these wild stories. And they would sit around and discuss them in the most matter-of-fact way. So in a way, I was introduced to a special local form of surrealism at an early age. And so there was always a question in my mind about what's actually true and what is just another art form. Now, I've always been interested in trying to define what makes up the late 20th century American, for example. And so, as an artist, I've always thought my main job was to be a spy, to use my eyes and ears and find some of the answers. For example, I like to hang around the banks of phones in airports, one of my favorite listening posts, and eavesdrop on conversations. Now, I usually travel on the same schedule as salesmen, and after lunch, these guys call into the main office, and I just stand there at the phones, listening in and taking notes for my portrait of the American salesman.
Frank? Listen, Frank. You know, I hate to say this about Brad. I mean, we both know he's got a heck of a job. Yeah. Oh, you're so right. But you know, we both know that Brad just isn't pulling his weight. You know what I mean? And I'm not saying this just because we're both up for the same Safeway account.
So this book is really a collection of voices and stories, as well as portraits of people that I've met along the way.
I no longer love your mouth. I no longer love your eyes. I no longer love your eyes. I no longer love the color of your sweaters. I no longer love it. I no longer love the color of your sweaters. I no longer love the way you hold your pen and pencil. I no longer love it. Your mouth, your eyes, your ways. up, I say. This must be my lucky day. Jump up, get out, get on my way. Every slobbery frog and every mangy dog that crosses my path reminds me. You're my precious jewel and you're my precious one. My compensation. I used to live in a big house. All I ever thought about was getting out. When I met you, there was something about you. Every slobbery frog and every mangy dog that crosses my path conspires to remind me. I love your bread. I love your bread. I love your bread.
In 1980, as part of a project called Word of Mouth, I was invited, along with 11 other artists, to go to Ponape, a tiny island in the middle of the Pacific. The idea was that we'd sit around talking for a few days, and then the conversations would be made into a talking record. The first night, we were all really jet-lagged. But as soon as we sat down, the organizers set up all these mics and switched on 1,000-watt light bulbs. And we tried our best to seem as intelligent as possible. Television had just come to Ponape a week before we arrived, and there was a strange excitement around the island as people crowded around the few sets. Then, the day after we arrived, in a bizarre replay of the first TV show ever broadcast to Ponape, prisoners escaped from a jail, broke into the radio station, and murdered the DJ. Then they went off on a rampage through the jungle, armed with lawnmower blades. In all, 4 people were murdered in cold blood. Detectives, flown in from Guam to investigate, swarmed everywhere. At night, we stayed around in our cottages, listening out into the jungle. Finally, the local chief decided to hold a ceremony for the murder victims. The artist Marina Abramovich and I went, as representatives of our group, to film it. The ceremony was held in a large thatched lean-to, and most of the ceremony involved cooking beans in pits and brewing a dark drink from roots. The smell was overwhelming. Dogs careened around barking, and everybody seemed to be having a fairly good time, as funerals go. After a few hours, Marina and I were presented to the chief, who was sitting on a raised platform above the pits. We'd been told We couldn't turn our backs on the chief at any time or ever be higher than he was. So we scrambled up onto the platform with our film equipment and sort of duck-waddled up backwards to the chief. As a present, I brought one of those little Fred Flintstone cameras, the kind where the film canister is also the body of the camera, and I presented it to the chief. He seemed delighted and began to click off pictures. He wasn't advancing the film between shots, but since we were told we shouldn't speak unless spoken to, I wasn't able to inform him that he wasn't going to get 12 pictures, but only one very, very complicated one. After a couple more hours, the chief lifted his hand, and there was absolute silence. All the dogs had suddenly stopped barking. We looked around and saw the dogs. All their throats had been simultaneously cut, and their bodies, still breathing, pierced with rods, were turning on the spits. The chief insisted we join in the meal, but Marina had turned green, and I asked if we could just have ours to go. They carefully wrapped the dogs in leaves, and we carried their bodies away. But you know, starting is always the hard part. It's like stuttering. You're only afraid at the beginning. That's where the fear is. So you only stutter at the beginning of the word, when it's starting. I mean, nobody ever stutters at the end. There's no stuttering, because by then, it's too late to be afraid. By then, there are only the regrets. It started out with a bad day. And I was sitting around in my studio, feeling sorry for myself. And the phone rang, and a voice said, "This is so-and-so, and I'm from NASA, and we'd like you to be the first artist in residence here." And I said, "You're not from NASA." And I hung up the phone. About 5 minutes later, the same person called, and I said, "Come on, I mean, I was sure it was a fan who had figured out what my secret dream was and had decided to torture me." Now, finally, I called someone at NASA, and he said that yes, I had actually been chosen to be the first artist in residence at NASA, and he wanted to see if I was interested. And I said, "Well, what does an artist in residence actually do? I mean, what does that mean with a space program? And they said they didn't really know what that meant, and what did I think it meant? And I thought, who are these people? And then I saw Lola Bell's face, and she had one of these brand new expressions. And first was the realization that she was prey, and that these birds had come to kill her. And second was a whole new thought. It was the realization that they can come from the air. I mean, I never thought of that. A whole 180 more degrees that I'm now responsible for. It's not just the stuff down here, the dirt and the rocks and the smells and the trees, but all of this, too. And the rest of the time we were in the mountains, out on the trails, she just kept looking over her shoulder and trotting along with her head in the air. And she had this whole new gait, really awkward, not with her nose to the ground following the smells, but pointing straight up, sniffing, sampling, scanning the thin sky, like there's something wrong with the air. And I thought, where have I seen this look before? And then I realized it was the same look on the faces of my neighbors in New York in the days right after 9/11, when they suddenly realized, first, that they could come from the air, and second, that it would be that way from now on. It would always be that way. And we had passed through a door, and we would never be going back. Yes, night is when the mind rests and prepares for the next day. Here we go again. As a team sport. Life as something that uncoils inside us. A world that comes in through your skin. And dogs hobbling across the mud to a brownish yellow sea. A sick monkey on the beach. food, however, is delicious. I have to say that much at least. And animals popping out of their holes for a last look before the winter snows. Lights out. We embody the spirit of motion. We're bodies in motion. We're bodies in motion. We dig down in the ocean, swing up to the stars. We own the moon and the earth. We're masters of Mars. We're bodies in motion. We embody the spirit of motion. Our ancestors cowered in caves, afraid of the dark and the thunder. Wrapped up in black magic and rage, they were slaves to their hunger. Now we fly across mountains and plains. We know all about time and big numbers. Bodies in motion. We embody the spirit of motion. I love you with all my heart. You have my devotion. I loved you from the start. We're bodies in motion. We embody the spirit of motion. Blew the weight of the world, eternal speed. Puts a dent in my shoulder, burning my spine, burning my spine. Some say the future is crowded, fighting for water and space. Chaotic and dark and loud, everything used to have been taken. But I say the future's within, the still point to the mind. When we escape the bonds of earth and break the bonds of time. Somebody asked me to design religion, I would make it all about snow. No good or evil, and no suffering. Just perfect crystal spinning in ecstasy, 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 ecstasy. Ooh, the weight of the world, eternal spin, puts a dent in my shoulder, burning my spine, burning my spine. Ooh, the weight of the world, eternal spin, puts a dent in my shoulder, burning my spine, burning my spine. We dig down in the ocean, swing up to the stars. We own the moon and the earth. We're masters of Mars. Bodies in motion. We embody the spirit of motion. Bodies in motion. We embody the spirit of motion.
Last night I dreamed I died, and that my life had been rearranged into some kind of theme park. And all my friends were walking up and down the boardwalk. And my dead grandmother was selling cotton candy out of a little shack. And there was this big Ferris wheel about half a mile out in the ocean, half in and half out of the water. And all my old boyfriends were on it with their new girlfriends. And the boys were waving and shouting. And the girls were saying, eek. Then they disappear under the surface of the water. And when they come up, they're laughing and gasping for breath. dream. I'm on a tightrope, and I'm tipping back and forth, trying to keep my balance. And below me are all my relatives. And if I fall, I'll crush them. This long, thin line, the song line, the shout. The only thing that binds me to the turning world below. And all the people and noise and sounds and shouts. This tightrope made of sound. This long, thin line made of my own blood. Remember me is all I ask. And if remembered be a task, forget me. Remember me is all I ask. And if remembered be a task, forget me. This long, thin line, this long, thin line, this long, thin line, this tightrope. Remember me is all I ask. And if remembered be a task, forget me. This long, thin line, this long, thin line, this long, thin line, this tightrope made of sound.
with a live band of 6 Hawaiian guitars. I decided to soundproof my place, but I didn't hang the door very well, and all the sounds kept drifting in. About this time, like a lot of New Yorkers who find themselves on the West Coast, I got interested in various aspects of California's version of the occult. We would sit around at night while the Santa Ana winds howled outside and ask questions to the Ouija board. I found out a lot of information on my past 9,361 human lives on this planet. My first life was as a raccoon.
And then you were a cow. And then you were a bird. And then you were a hat.
Spelled the Ouija. We said, a hat. We couldn't figure it out. Finally, we guessed that the feathers from the bird had been made into a hat. Is this true?
Yes.
Spelled the Ouija.
Hat counts as half life.
And then?
Hundreds and hundreds of rabbis.
Now this is apparently my first life as a woman, which should explain quite a few things. Eventually, though, the Ouija's written words seemed to take on a personality, a kind of a voice. Finally, we began to ask the board if the Ouija would be